developments within the past 24. Okay, we will be telling you about that in just a second. But Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee is also joining us, former diplomat. Ambassador Mukherjee, what do you make of this possibility of this strike by the US this weekend itself? Those are the reports floating around.
Well, the Iranians have responded strongly, saying that they are willing to negotiate and negotiations are going on, but negotiations should not be conducted under this kind of military pressure and military buildup. In addition, the Iranian supreme leader has, through artificial intelligence, it seems the Iranians also now use AI. I was very impressed. Has shown the largest American warship right at the bottom of the Straits of Hormuz through AI, and said this is how a very powerful and dangerous military hardware looks, and this is how it looks when a more dangerous weapon puts it at the bottom of the Straits of Hormuz. In other words, what the Iranians are subtly conveying is that if the Straits of Hormuz gets blocked, then some of US's closest allies who have hosted American, who host American military bases, will have nowhere to send their oil. The oil prices will go up sky high, and it will also impact, apart from all of us, it will impact adversely the global economy and the American economy. Therefore, it doesn't make sense to come so close to brinkmanship in a part of the world which controls a vital asset required to keep the global economy going, including the American economy. That is probably the reason, Vineet, that Trump, knowing the risks involved, has not yet ordered the airstrikes. Though I'm told that some hotheads, his aides, some of his hot-headed aides, are urging that they do so. I do hope that good sense prevails and that some kind of a deal can be possible. Trump is a transactional deal maker, and he's also smart enough to know that if there are American casualties so close to the midterm, it's going to affect his ratings, which are already pretty low. So this is a very big deal for all of us watching, but it's an even bigger deal for the Americans, because the Straits of Hormuz are very blocked, are very narrow, and if there is a mishap, it will take quite some time to clear it. So while it's a little less tricky maybe than the Suez Canal, the issue is, in the case of the Suez Canal, you can always go down the longer route. In this particular case, those countries that need the Straits of Hormuz for oil exports and LNG exports, they have no other route. There's no overland route. So I'm sure they must be on the telephone with Trump, pleading with him not to go the final mile, which he's been threatening. Sometimes he does these threats to bring people to the negotiating table. Sometimes he sends an aircraft to pick up the president and bring him to Washington.
Okay.
I think he would not find it possible to do that with Iran, but you can't rule out anything with Iran.
All right. Let me in fact tell our viewers some more details emerging as well in the relation of the United States versus Iran tension. Now, in latest information coming in, the White House has briefed that US military could be ready for a possible attack by this weekend itself. That's something that White House is reportedly ready for. That's what's the reports emerging. The aircraft carrying USS Gerald R Ford is in fact en route to join its counterpart USS Abraham Lincoln in the region. That is something that is happening as we speak. Meanwhile, open source flight tracking data is showing heightened activity at RAF Mildenhall and RAF Lakenheath in England, key US Air Force bases, remember, in the region. Fighter jets also, including the F-35 Lightning, the F-22 Raptors, the F-16 Fighting Falcons, they've all been tracked moving from the US to Europe and to the Middle East. Also, scores of US military cargo planes have been flowing into Saudi Arabia. They've been flowing into Jordan, and they've also been flowing into Bahrain. Washington has, of course, deployed the third terminal high-altitude area defense systems. This has been done, in fact, to counter Iran's ballistic missile threat. So that is what the US has already strategized for ahead. Meanwhile, Patriot missile defense batteries have also been rushed into the region, into the Middle East. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has, in fact, said on record that Iran would make a very wise move to strike a deal with President Donald Trump. So the pressure tactics clearly, of course, underway. Iran has issued a NOTAM. They've announced planned rocket launches across parts of southern Iran on Thursday. That's something that Iran, of course, has been doing as well. They've been conducting various exercises. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, meanwhile, is likely to visit Israel next week for talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So that's also something to watch out for this coming week. So these are, of course, all the big developments which are happening. What is your interpretation of these developments? What more can be read into this? Major General Gigi Dwivedi, defense analyst, if I can draw you in here into your I know you're not an astrologer, but what sense are you getting about what's coming?
Well, the point is one can read the dots and join the dots, and you don't have to be astrologer to make a fairly accurate guess. Well, you are given a very detailed overview as to what exactly was going on the ground and what is going on the diplomatic front. Well, in the warfare, diplomacy and the ground preparation go on simultaneously. They complement each other. And your position on the ground, it dictates or determines the position on the negotiation table. So therefore, as far the armed forces are concerned, they always ensure that once the green on is given, they can take to the battlefield in almost zero time. So they don't require much of warning. And as far diplomacy is concerned, it is a very long drawn affair, and the talks are just concluded in Geneva through intermediaries, through indirect talks on. And diplomacy is always hopeful. There's always a window open, and their talks are ended on a note that they have somehow come to understanding on the guiding principles, and they will continue to talk. But here, few issues are very important. President Trump will push Iranians to a corner so that America can get a favorable deal. And deal is to cap the Iranian nuclear program and also to ensure that their stockpile is under inspections and give them a carrot and stick that in case they comply, then the sanctions could be lifted. On the other side, Iranians also had dug in their heels. And they are also wanting the guarantee that it should not happen off and on switch on the sanctions, and the deal should not be abrogated like the JCPOA was done in 2019. So the issue is that both sides are prepared. They are on the negotiation table, but also on the ground in case the current situation transition into a conflict, then the both sides are on it. But the point is, it will have very serious repercussions. Then what happened in June 2025, when when Israel launched the operations, that is the Flying Lion, and American also went in for Big Net Hammer. Now that was just a 14 days face-off, but this could be actually far more serious, as the ambassador was bringing out, that this will bring into the or how the oil supply chains will be impacted, how the global oil scene will get impacted, and also this could draw in the other players in the region, because the Iranian will try and hit the American bases in the region. So therefore this conflict could actually spiral into a regional conflict rather than only between Iran, America and Israel. So I think we need to hold on. But as I can make out, in case the deal doesn't come through, then possibly President Trump would likely to go and fire a strike. That's how I read the
Okay.
broad
Okay.
situation, and
Yes.
that's my
Yes.
astrological take.
Okay, okay. We're getting more breaking news. In fact, also as we speak, the head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog has issued a sharp warning. They've said the United States military buildup in the Middle East could shrink Iran's window for diplomacy. Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi has said time is running out to reach a negotiated agreement over Tehran's atomic program. Grossi stressed, and I quote, "There is not much time, but we are working on something concrete, signaling urgency as tensions continue in the region." Of course, so big statement being made there. How should now the head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog's recent statement be interpreted, Ambassador Mukherjee?
Actually, as Major General Dwivedi said, and I compliment him for his military acumen and his astrological powers, I, I, I do believe that the manner in which Trump abrogated the deal in 2019 made the Iranians rather unsure that even if they strike a good deal, will Trump abide by it? In other words, he may extract a lot of concessions and then go back on it to extract more concessions. That is the fear of the Iranians, because that is how he negotiates. He tries to get you into a corner and see how much he can get out of you, and then says yes, and then he goes back on it. In this particular case, as the IAEA head had said, earlier Iranian nuclear facilities were under safeguard. And because of that, there was an automatic international break or a restraint on Iran's nuclear program. Uh, what they are saying is that Iran, it is feared, is a full nuclear power. When you go in for an all-out assault on a nation that believes in martyrdom, that is Iran, you risk, as General Dwivedi said, a major escalation and a major regional conflict, because Iran has already warned the countries that host American military bases, its neighbors, that in that case they would attack those bases. Those countries in turn have warned the Americans and told the Iranians that they will not allow those bases to be used to attack Iran. Therefore, the warning coming from the IAEA chief is very stark and clear. Let the negotiations continue and please involve IAEA, because IAEA has not been fully involved. They should be involved. Unfortunately, Trump has a very low opinion of multilateralism, which is why he set up the so-called peace board, bypassing Security Council, etc. He doesn't have any respect for multilateral institutions, and he doesn't have any respect for any of these specialized agencies. I think that one should take that warning very, very seriously. And one should also understand that this time it appears to me that we are really on the brink. And that is why I said that I hope Trump steps back from the brink, because he is dealing with a highly volatile situation which could really affect global supply chains. Let's say, in India's case, let's say we have reserves for 6 to 7 weeks. Suppose the conflict carries on for, let's say, 3 months. We would be affected. The whole world would be affected. Of course, we have alternative sources of energy, but it would push up energy prices. It would skyrocket. And would we be the only country? Not at all. It would affect the entire globe, including the developed West and United States itself. So I think that it is a situation which is just on the brink, and it just needs one false move to push it over the cliff. Because sometimes, as we know, Vineet, I'm a student of history, sometimes great wars begin with just one false move. As World War I happened, there was assassination of the Archduke, and there was the World War I. World War II, there was the annexation mistakenly by Hitler. There was World War II. So
Yes.
these are all issues
Okay.
where
Okay. We're getting more breaking news. Stay with us. Stay with us. We're getting more breaking news also coming in now. Poland has issued an urgent warning to its citizens in Iran. They've asked them to leave the country immediately. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said the situation is deteriorating rapidly. He's warned that the window to evacuate may close within hours. Tusk has stressed that it's possible that in a few hours there will be no option to evacuate from the country, underlining the gravity of the security situation. So, a very serious warning being given by the Polish Prime Minister. Major General Dwivedi, talk us through the language actually used in this warning. It possibly indicates that something imminent is brewing.
Absolutely, Uday. The point is that these precautions are taken so that the citizens are not caught off guard, and these are the protocol diplomatic language, because the issue is that once the balloon goes up, then the people who suffer maximum are the civilians, are the people who are actually not involved directly in the war. So it's a time that when the war clouds are up in the air, then there are certain protocols that are observed. The diplomatic protocols are there, the human rights protocols are there, so that the people are not caught in the middle of the war. And all nations take precautions, because the issue is right now the situation is very fragile, and it could be just takes only few hours to decide. And once you push the button for the operations, then there's no looking back. The operation in this case will start on a very high note, because today two carrier groups are there, well, very close shadow of Iran and the Middle East, and that means they're fully prepared. It's not going to go the escalatory ladder. It's going to start with a very high intensity, and therefore there will be no time for the civilians to actually evacuate. So I think this is the right time the warning has been given, and one can predict that in case the deal doesn't move forward, I think President Trump is quite prepared. And let me take you back to the January. Around the mid-January, President Trump was very keen. In fact, he had made up his mind to strike once the protests were on in Iran. It's only countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other GCC countries who prevailed upon him. But right at the moment, in case the deal doesn't go through, I think President Trump is quite likely to exercise his option, and therefore this is a very fair warning for the civilians to evacuate or to exit, because once the balloon is up, there will be no option, because every airspace will be closed, the complete waterways will be closed, and therefore they're bound to take the punitive hit. I think this is the time that sane sense should prevail, that Iranians should show flexibility.
More breaking news coming in. More breaking news coming in. Stay with us. United States Senator Ted Cruz has also delivered a strong message. He's aimed at that message is aimed at Iran's supreme leader, saying Ayatollah Khamenei has only one option left, which is to step down from power. In an interview, Cruz has said the Iranian regime is in tatters. He's also accused it of seeking time to rebuild amidst rising pressure. He's added he does not believe President Trump would accept any such delay tactics. Cruz further stated that there is no deal to be had on Iran's nuclear program, claiming Tehran has never agreed to fold any place, anywhere, anytime inspections. So Cruz now reiterating in an interview that Khamenei must go, Ambassador Mukherjee.
Well, he must be completely out of touch with ground reality, because the Shah of Iran is widely regarded in Iran as a CIA agent, even among those who are opposed to Khamenei. And efforts to reinstall his son are never going to succeed. Secondly, in any country which has been under colonial rule, if it is perceived that external hostile powers are seeking to displace unpopular government, the popularity of that government goes up immediately among the people. It is for the people of Iran to decide, and not Mr. Ted Cruz or anyone else. And for that, they have to be prepared for blood, sweat, and tears, because this regime will be difficult to dislodge. But if the people of Iran decide, ultimately they will go. But to bring the whole region on the brink of catastrophe, to bring the global oil supplies on the brink of catastrophe, is not the way to go about it. And I do hope, Vineet, I don't have any information with me, that we have also asked our citizens to evacuate ASAP, because getting out of Iran in such a situation, as Major General Dwivedi said, is very tricky. I hope that we must have told whoever is left in Iran, because we had evacuated quite a few couple of months ago, but some have went back, that they should leave as soon as possible. The situation is very fragile and very volatile. Airspace is still open, but we don't know whether by tomorrow evening airspace will have shut down. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't
Okay.
don't believe.
Okay. Point taken. All right, more breaking news coming in now. The United States has announced new visa restrictions. They've announced new visa restrictions on Iranian officials and telecommunication executives, accusing them of repression during recent anti-government protests. The Trump administration has said the move is part of a broader effort to increase pressure on Tehran. Even as nuclear talks continue, the U.S. State Department has confirmed 18 Iranian officials and industry leaders, along with their immediate family members, are being targeted for their role in cracking down on protests and cutting off internet access, saying they inhibited the right of Iranians to free expression and peaceful assembly. So, big action by the United States. Major General Dwivedi, how do you interpret this?
Well, diplomacy is working side by side, and these restrictions or these actions also convey a very strong symbolic message to the Iranian regime that the news is tightening around Iran. And one important thing which I wish to make is that as far as regime change is concerned, this is aim plus of the American government of President Trump, but this needs to be more internally driven, because if there's a external infringement or external, I would say, involvement, then it could backfire, because then it will only galvanize and strengthen the Iranian position. So therefore, this has to be internally driven, of course, politically supported by the external factors, but the point is that a change of regime has to be internally processed, not externally driven. And news is tightening around Iranian administration.
That it certainly is. We're out of time. My thanks to our guests for joining us on this discussion. We're slipping into a very short break on that note.